from NJ.com, this is Talk is Cheap, a New York Giants podcast. We're talking Big Blue football all year round.
Welcome on in, Giants fans, to episode 137 of the Talk is Cheap podcast right here on NJ.com. As always, I'm Matt Lombardo, and once again, rejoined by my good friend and fellow Giants beat reporter, Ryan Dunleavy. Ryan, hello and welcome back, and congratulations. You can pick up your membership card, your cigar, and your T-shirt for the new Fathers Club after we get done the show.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I was catching up on my sleep.
There is light at the end of the tunnel, my friend. I've been there. 2 or 3 months from now, you'll hopefully be sleeping normal once again. But Giants fans probably struggling to sleep as they're...
Oh, look at that transition. Oh, we picked up right where we left off. Look at that transition. Giants fans can't sleep. There you go.
After falling to 1-3 and the season taking a really difficult turn for the worst after falling to the Saints 33-18. Before we jump into it, Ryan, what's your biggest of big picture takeaways from yesterday's game?
Ooh, that's a good one. That they can't move the ball on offense. That's the biggest big picture, that it's the same soft zone cover two. Look, let's dumb this down for the football fan who doesn't know what cover two is. Defenses are dropping two safeties as far as 20 yards off the line of scrimmage and basically saying to the Giants, you're not going over the top. No more Beckham big plays, no Shepard big plays. We're going to keep everything in front of us and challenge you to move the ball with a long extended drive. And the Giants can't do it because they can't get consistent rushing attack. Barkley hits home runs but isn't getting consistent yardage, and the Giants shoot themselves in the foot too much. So when you have a 10-play drive, that's 10 opportunities for a false start or a holding or a sack. And so these teams are taking away big plays from the Giants, making them nickel and dime them down the field, and the Giants can't do it. And they haven't been able to do it for 3 years under two coaches with, totally different personnel on the offensive line and whatnot. It's just same old story.
Yeah, I think that's a great one, and I think that's where we'll start. But before we dive into yesterday's game and go into a comprehensive breakdown, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review, or tell us what you like, what you don't like. We really appreciate that, and it helps us grow the show. You can also find us on Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. And also follow us on Twitter. The podcast is @TalkIsCheapNYG. Ryan is @RY Dunleavy, and I'm @Matt Lombardo NFL. Ryan, you're absolutely right. Big picture, this team has struggled to move the football. Yesterday was no exception. I think my biggest takeaway from yesterday's game is that despite the fact that you have a dynamic home run hitter in Odell Beckham Jr., one of the premier slot receivers in the league in Sterling Shepard, there were no big plays that were hit over the top. And this was a Saints secondary that entered week 4 having allowed an average of 10.2 yards per attempt. Eli Manning averaged 6.23 yards per attempt. And it doesn't get any easier next week because the New Orleans Saints allow 100 yards fewer per game through the air than the Saints do. That was an opportunity yesterday to get your offense on track through the air, trying to maximize your skill position players, and the Giants weren't able to do that. Manning, the numbers are okay. 31 of 41, 255, 1 touchdown. He was sacked 3 times, quarterback rating of 99.1, higher than Drew Brees in terms of the passer rating, more yards than Brees. On
Is
more
there
attempts.
A more meaningless stat than passer rating? Is there?
No.
I'm not sure there's a more meaningless stat in the NFL than passer rating.
I agree, and it's one of the more convoluted ones to figure out how they actually compute it. But you just watch the game and you watch the eye test, and you look at a pivotal third down early in the first quarter. They throw a flanker screen to Odell Beckham Jr. behind the line of scrimmage that goes nowhere. You have an opportunity to stretch the field deep to Odell Beckham Jr. along the sideline, and the ball's nowhere close. And I know that it was probably only in the grand scheme of things 3 or 4 throws that were overthrown, but when you're only taking 4 or 5 chances down the field, those misses, when you have the chance to connect on an X play, a chunk play, or a home run, they get magnified, and Eli's just not hitting those right now.
Yeah, look, here's the bottom line. If you told anybody in the NFL, forget Giants fans, if you told NFL people league-wide the Giants are going to hold Drew Brees to the numbers they held Drew Brees to, I think it was 200 low 200s yards passing. Guy came in completing 80% of his passes, completed only slightly above 50%, I think. And Michael Thomas, who's the NFL, who has become, dare I say, I know this is blasphemous, has become the NFL's most dangerous receiver. That's not a shot at Odell Beckham, but Odell Beckham isn't scaring anybody, whether that's him, the offense, Manning, the offensive line, Shurmur, whatever it is. Odell Beckham has 0 touchdowns in 5 games. Michael Thomas leads the NFL in receptions, and the Giants hold him to 4 catches for 47 yards. Something we really haven't talked about is the great job Janoris Jenkins did on him. I was hoping to find him in the locker room today. He wasn't there. So I think if you told anybody, if you gave the box score to people around the NFL and said, this is what the Saints are going to do against the Giants, people would have said, oh, Giants are going to win that game. And to not win the game when you hold Brees and Thomas in check and you get what was a pretty good defensive effort for 3/4 of the game, feels like an enormous missed opportunity.
No, I agree with that as well. And I think that the bigger picture concern about Odell Beckham Jr., this was the second time in 4 weeks when he was held under 100 receiving yards. And when the game was really within reach, I'm talking from quarter 1 through quarter 3, he only had 21 receiving yards over that span. So they're just not getting Odell Beckham Jr. involved. And I know you're missing Evan Ingram, and that eliminates an element of this. But Ryan, you started the podcast talking about the fact that teams like the Dallas Cowboys, who had a lot of success with it, and the Saints once again on Sunday afternoon are playing a soft zone cover 2 defense. And it blows my mind that you're not running more designed Saquon Barkley screen passes, more designed Saquon Barkley wheel routes out of the backfield, more shallow crossers over the middle of the field for for Sterling Shepard, rather, without Ingram in there, for Rhett Ellison. You're not attacking the soft middle of the defense. You're either waiting for the home run that never comes, or you're sitting in the pocket and waiting to dump it off to Barkley on a non-designed passing play. And I just don't know how that's efficient for an offense to ever get its footing.
Look, to me, the solution boils down to that. And you make a good point about Barkley and pass routes. For me, it boils down to this. The Giants bragged all offseason about wanting to be a big, tough, run-first, physical football team. Well, you know what? The way to beat a soft zone defense is to run the football. That's what everybody will tell you around the NFL.
Including Saquon Barkley.
It's what Shurmur said today. It's what Russell Shepard, a veteran who I really like on this team, has been around the block multiple times, said, run the ball. We're going to keep seeing soft zone until we prove we can run the ball. And it's what Saquon Barkley, a rookie who is becoming one of the most the leading spokespersons for this team, said, he wants the rock, basically. He said the Giants need to see it as disrespectful that teams keep playing soft zone against the Giants. He says, until the Giants need to be offended by it, basically, that teams are saying you can't run the ball against us, so we're going to take away your deep plays. And we focus so much on the offensive line, and rightfully so, on their inability to protect Manning and the Flowers and the change with Wheeler and
I thought they were better yesterday in terms of run blocking. Right.
I don't know if I can't say that they were. I mean, Barkley had 44 yards on the ground. That's not good. And 28 were on 1 carry. I don't know that they.
Yeah, on 10 carries, though. And I think that falls on Pat Shurmur. I think that, as you pointed out, when they're playing that soft zone, and as Saquon said on Monday, you need to run the ball. And they got away from that. And you look at the big picture, you look at the drive charts, and you look at the fact that the first possession of the game, Ryan, they marched down the field methodically. They put together a possession that chews up 5 minutes of clock, 10 plays, 60 yards. Sure, they were aided by a 15-yard penalty. They picked up 7 first downs, and they wound up scoring on a really nice throw from Eli Manning to Sterling Shepard for the touchdown. But the rest of the way, until the fourth quarter, when Saquon Barkley scored on a 1-yard touchdown where he leapt over the line of scrimmage, you look at the drives, and you look at 5 plays, only 1 first down. 6 plays, only 2 first downs. 3 and out, a fumble, end of the half rather. You look at a punt, another 6-play drive with only 1 first down. 4 first downs that leads to a field goal, a 3 and out, a 10-play touchdown drive, and then a lost fumble by Eli Manning. That's simply not good enough. When you have 7 drives on your opening, 7 first downs rather, on your opening drive of the game, and then the rest of the way you put together, that's 3, that's 5, that's 8. When you put together 13 first downs the rest of the way. That's just not good enough.
That's it. It's really that simple. And Shurmur keeps getting up there and saying we need to be better. We're not scoring enough points. Well, it's good that he's acknowledging the obvious. It's good that he's not pretending that they are doing enough. But I think everybody wants to hear answers. Yes, you aren't scoring enough points. How do you score more points? Yes, you need to be better. How do you get better? Because there doesn't seem to be a lot of answers right now. Let's call it what it is. There is no personnel change the Giants can make. I sat down. I was going to do 5 ways to fix the Giants offense. I don't know what they are. The Giants have so many stars and so much. The bottom of the roster is so not comparable to the top of the roster. There's no personnel. You made the one personnel change you can make, Wheeler for Flowers. That was it. There's no other guy you can swap in or out. There is no real. You're not going to play Barkley less for Gallman. You're not going to play Beckham or Shepard less for Latimer. I mean, I don't know, what are they going to do other than call better plays, basically?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there, and you need more balance, right? And I think that when you look at the end of yesterday's game and you look at how it played out, granted, they were behind for most of the game, so you have to put the ball in the air. I understand that. But when you throw the ball 21 times and you wind up only rushing it 15, that's not good enough. When Saquon Barkley, who was chosen number 2 overall in the NFL draft, and he's averaging over 4 yards per carry, you only hand him the rock 10 times. That's not good enough.
I think we're getting away. I think Shurmur might be guilty of this too. You and I are guilty of it, but we're sports writers. I think people are guilty of looking at Barkley as this multi-dimensional. He's so good he's so good as a receiver and a runner that they forget. Yeah. The receiving is supposed to be the complementary aspect. That's supposed to be the bonus aspect of what he does. That's supposed to complement his running ability. It's not supposed to be 50-50, or it's not supposed to be more catching than running. He is a running back. Hand him the ball and let him run. I mean, I thought it was shocking. Alvin Kamara had his career high carries against the Giants. It was 19 carries. And that's because he's usually splitting carries with Mark Ingram, I think. But still, he's never had a 20 carry game in the NFL. And he's, one of the best running backs in the NFL. Well, Saquon Barkley needs to be a 20-carry running back. And whatever he does pass catching, that's a bonus. Yep. But the idea of 10 carries and 10 catches, that's not going to work right now, maybe in the long run, but right now, as defenses are playing the Giants, that needs to be more like 18 carries, 2 catches, in my opinion.
16 total touches. He had 8 targets in the passing game, caught 2 of them, wound up with 100 all-purpose yards. Alvin Kamara, as you pointed out, Ryan, 19 carries for 134, 5 catches for 47 yards, and Kamara
and
rushed for 3 touchdowns. Yes. Yeah. So you look at the usage of Alvin Kamara, and I think that's the blueprint for the Giants when it comes to Saquon Barkley. And I don't think that Barkley needs that Mark Ingram compliment. The Giants just need to get the ball in his hands. And I thought they did a nice job of that on the first possession and on the final drive of the game. But by that final drive, when they went down and scored the touchdown, the Saints were similar to the Cowboys, already dropped out of their aggressive fronts. They were just keeping everything in front of them.
It wasn't even cover 2. It was like cover 20. It was make up a name for it. It wasn't even cover 2. It was prevent. It was cover 2 on steroids, basically.
Yeah, Barkley now has 100 all-purpose yards in all 4 of his first games. He has 453 all-purpose yards and 3 touchdowns, and he's on pace for 1,812 all-purpose yards. Those are yards from scrimmage and 12 touchdowns.
And the Giants are still not a playoff team, which
Correct.
Is
not even close.
Nobody wants to hear this, and we're not going to. I'll give you your say on it because I know you're passionate about it. But we're not going to spend 10 minutes on this on the podcast. But this is what everybody in the camp that I was in and the camp other sports writers in were afraid of when the Giants picked Saquon Barkley with the number 2 pick. He's phenomenal. He's going to win Rookie of the Year. He's right now been their best offensive player, including Odell Beckham, and the team is still not a playoff team. So I don't know how he's helping them.
Yep, I don't know that this year, and we said this earlier on in the podcast where you asked me, would the Giants be better with Eli Manning or Sam Darnold? I think in the short term this year, the Giants are better with Sam Darnold, but in the long run, let's face it, Ryan, this team is staring down the barrel of a 4-12 or 5-11 finish. If everything goes right, if they continue to play it the way they are right now. So you're going to be in the mix towards the top of the draft with a class that has Justin Herbert out of Oregon. You have Will Grier out of West Virginia, who's making a case for the Heisman Trophy. You're talking about Drew Lock from Missouri. You're talking about some very good quarterbacks who are going to be there at the top of the board. And I think having Barkley in the long run.
That's assuming, Matt, the Giants have a high grade on those guys. They didn't have a high grade on Darnold or Rosen or Mayfield. So what makes me
very true. This is very true. The Giants would have to have a high grade. But my point in all of this, and I'm still a very staunch proponent of this thought process, and maybe it's flawed, but my thought is in the long run, if you draft a Grier or you draft a Herbert or you take one of these top potential franchise quarterbacks and you have Barkley, that quarterback is being dropped into a much better situation, and Barkley can help develop him by taking the pressure off of him in the running game and the passing game, that in 2 and 3 years down the line, the Giants are better positioned with Barkley and this QB than the Jets are just with Sam Darnold. That's my thought on this, and we'll see how it plays out.
I don't know. It just feels like the Giants are wasting some of Odell Beckham's best years. I mean, Odell Beckham's been to the playoffs once in his career. He played one playoff game. They lost it. He didn't play well. I look back, like Tiki Barber went to the playoffs 5 times in 10 years. Michael Strahan went 7 times in 15 years. I think LT went 7 times in 13 years. These great Giants players of the last 25 years, the team's always in the playoffs. The Giants are in danger of turning Odell Beckham into Barry Sanders.
Yeah, no, that's a very great point. And I think that we saw some of the deficiencies out of the quarterback position right now on Sunday. And I went into the Saints locker room after the game, and I spoke to several defensive players, several players in the defensive backfield. And I know that Pat Shurmur didn't want to hear this on Monday when I asked him about it. But, I spoke to several players, and they said that they felt that the front seven, quote unquote, put a scare in Eli Manning. Kevin Crawley, one of their cornerbacks, told me he thought the front seven put a scare in Eli Manning, and that there were deep balls to be had, opportunities down the field to be had, and Eli Manning didn't pull the trigger and didn't take advantage of those. And we'll go back and watch the game tape, but on first glance, what are your thoughts when you hear an opponent, a secondary player, say those sort of things about an offense? I'm used to hearing guys say, well, yeah, we knew the play, right? We could tell what was coming. We knew their signals, or, they had telegraphed their offense. But I've never heard a guy say that, yeah, we got beat over the top and they just didn't take the shot. That was very interesting to me to hear that come out of their mouths yesterday afternoon. Yeah,
I think that I think everybody knows the blueprint on the Giants, and I think that for the Saints to say that, Shurmur said it's easy for an opponent to say that. Look, you're right. I can't imagine an opponent saying that. But then you have Marshawn Lattimore. I think you asked him too, and he said they were playing a lot of man defense. And I was like, that didn't look like man defense to me. So sometimes the players, sometimes the players say things they don't even really know how it sounds. So to me, Matt, I don't know how about to you. I appreciate that he said that. To me, I didn't really see them getting beat over the top. I saw them playing a very, very soft, keep it in front of you defense. And maybe the players don't like to admit that that's what they were doing. Maybe to them it sounds like they were, not being aggressive or not competing. Hey, they were winning. They outsmarted the Giants. That they might not have been sexy, but they should just own it. Own the fact that you outsmarted the Giants and you kept everything in front of you. Because to me, it certainly didn't seem like there were shots to be taken. I appreciate the Saints guy saying that, but that's certainly not what I saw from my eagle eye view.
Yeah, I thought there were a couple of opportunities that Manning just missed on. I don't know. And look, when the all-22
he only threw
comes
2
out,
passes over 20 yards. He was 0 for 2 over 20 yards.
Well, there you go. And I think that when the all-22 comes out, we'll get to a better sense of if there were any free-breaking wide receivers that were open that they just didn't see. But I can speak for the game against the Dallas Cowboys. There were 2 or 3 instances in that game. There were 1 or 2 instances against the Houston Texans where that was the case, particularly with Odell Beckham. And I think it's really fascinating that I know that Odell Beckham was off the field for all but 4 games last season. But here's the thing. He was on the field for all of the 2016 season. This is not the first time that Odell Beckham Jr. and Eli Manning have been on the field together. But I just get the sense from watching this that their timing is off. And that's fascinating to me because you have a veteran quarterback who all through training camp was working with this guy. They've been together. They've been teammates. You know what Odell Beckham Jr. is, but yet these guys just can't seem to get on the same page. And I know, as Pat Shurmur pointed out, that there's a fine line between being aggressive and being reckless. That was his go-to word during the press conference on Monday. But I feel like you're being more reckless by hamstringing that element of your offense and allowing defenses to set the tone for how they defend you by not even airing it out, which they haven't done.
Yeah, look, the thing that I think is missing is, and this is unfair to put on Odell Beckham, but this is what makes Odell Beckham. Where are all the plays where Odell Beckham takes the 10-yard slant and turns it into a 45-yard touchdown, or takes the, or takes the 20-yard crossing route, breaks 3 tackles and turns it into an 80-yard touchdown? Yep. That's kind of what Odell Beckham's career has been. A lot of run after the catch yards.
And he has the ability to do that. He has a track record of it. You're right, and we haven't seen it. We saw a couple of plays against the Houston Texans. There was one at the end of the first half, and there was one at the beginning of the third quarter where, and Odell talked about this last week, that he felt like he just couldn't kick it into overdrive because he was hesitant about being hit over the top, and it's that split second that makes all the difference. I didn't even see them go that route against the Saints. And that's what I talked about earlier. If they're playing a soft cover 2, that's where you attack the middle of the field. You don't sit back and wait and dump it off to Barkley. You have designed throws to Barkley and designed intermediate routes to Beckham to then cause the safeties to creep up and respect the short passing game when you can go over the top. And they aren't doing that.
Yeah, I wasn't covering the Giants in 15 and 16, but I know a lot of Giants fans, and the running joke used to be like the offense is essentially get the ball to Beckham and get out of the way and hope you can break a big play. Well, now the offense isn't even that. Now those fans are longing for that, where it's like now you can't even now Beckham can't even break free into space. So now you're taking away what you used to mock as like your best play is now you're longing for it. It's very strange. With 2 other things I want to hit on, Matt, from yesterday. Let's go first with the Giants defense. They gave up 33 points. Are you any concern for you that the defense is going to turn on the offense? Maybe, start barking at each other, maybe have some ill will, some sort of, we've seen this situation before, right? When it happened here last year, and it's happened other places, where one side of the ball, and in this case it's the defense, feels like they're doing their job and the other side isn't holding up their end of the bargain. Any concern for that for you right now with the Giants?
Yeah, I think that we might be a couple of games away from that, but if it's going to happen, it's going to happen during this crucible. I mean, you look at the next 3 games and you go to Carolina, you come back on a short week and you host the Eagles on a Thursday night, then you get back on a plane for a Monday night game against the Atlanta Falcons. That's murderer's row in terms of teams that are expected to compete at the top of the NFC, and the Giants aren't yet at that level. So I think that if this continues to be a trend and the offense can't move the ball and the defense is on the field for 39 minutes of the game, or they're giving up 27 points, or worse yet, they give up 20 points and they lose 20-14. That's when I think that we might see it, and I think that if it does happen, we're going to see it during this stretch and not later in the year.
Yeah. That's a fair point. To me, I think you have to be aware of that just because it happened here last year, but there are a lot of new leaders. I mean, 3 of the captains are new. So I think that I think they're probably not at that point. And, obviously it's easier to do that when you feel like, the locker room is run by the players, not by the coaches. And with Shurmur Shurmur in his first year and all, the coaches aren't going anywhere. So the players are going to have a hard time turning on each other because the players will go here before the coach, unlike last year.
Correct. And I thought yesterday overall, and I'm glad you brought up the defense, I thought for three quarters, they played as well as you could expect against the New Orleans Saints. They did a really nice job, as you pointed out, against Michael Thomas. Through three quarters, it was 19-10. It was a two-score game, and then the fourth quarter happened, and I think the dam just broke. I think the wheels fell off in the fourth quarter, and the Saints finally started to do what they do, and they got Kamara more involved, and they threw some different packages out there with the backup quarterback on the field as kind of that, multi-purpose Swiss Army knife type of a player.
Yeah,
and the Giants,
Sean Payton's a fun coach to watch.
He really is. Yeah, and you wind up losing 33-18. You give up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but I don't lay the blame for yesterday's loss on the defense. I think the offense didn't show up. They didn't take advantage of opportunities. And when you can't move the ball effectively down the field and you lose time of possession, eventually the Saints offense is going to do their thing, and that's what happened late.
The last thing I wanted to bring up was, what do you make of the officiating in this game? I thought it was atrocious. I don't mean to sound like a Giants homer, but I think everybody knows I'm not. I thought it was atrocious. I thought the Giants got a bad whistle. I asked 4 or 5 players about it in the locker room after the game. I got that quote that everybody's talking about from Alec Ogletree, which is a head scratcher, about an official telling him that he didn't make a call because you wouldn't make it in the Super Bowl, and people have interpreted it different ways. Like, why are the refs thinking about the Super Bowl when they're supposed to be reffing this game? And why are the refs worried about what you would call in a Super Bowl versus now you should call every game the same? What do you make of the officiating overall in that Ogletree comment?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'll tackle the Ogletree comment. And if that's where Pete Morelli's head is at in the middle of a regular season game.
And let's be clear, it wasn't. We don't know that it was Morelli.
Correct,
it was somebody on Morelli's crew.
But it's his crew, and this crew has officiated multiple Super Bowls. That if that's where your head is at, then you don't deserve to officiate a Super Bowl, because you should get there based on merit, based on your performance through the course of the year, not by trying to tailor how you call games by how you think it's supposed to be called in a Super Bowl. Call the game. And to me, I thought that the Janoris Jenkins horse collar was one of the more egregious things I've ever seen, because it wasn't a horse collar, unless the rule has somehow changed over the last 4 weeks and we don't know about it. I thought that there were a couple other plays. I thought the Saints got away with a tripping penalty that went uncalled in the first half of the game. And
there's been some talk of you're talking about in the first half of the game. There was some talk of a tripping penalty when they were backed up against their own end zone with 3 minutes to go, and I think that was egregious. That Dalvin Tomlinson got tripped.
That's the one. Yep, I just couldn't remember when it actually happened.
Yeah,
I thought it was earlier.
Yeah,
okay.
It was when they were backed up into the shadow of their own end zone. They say they didn't go call that. A lot of people have asked me if that's a safety. It's not a safety. Doesn't matter where Brees is. It's where the offensive lineman was when he tripped him. He's not in the end zone. So it would have only been like a 1.5 yard penalty, but it would have wiped out a 21-yard gain.
Yeah, and Pat Shurmur talked about it on Monday, and he said that typically the team will send a handful of plays to the league to get clarification try to figure out what was going on, why that flag was thrown. And he said this week there's a bigger handful, quote unquote, than most weeks. But I will say this: when you look at the penalties, and the Giants wind up getting called, I believe, 6 times for 61 yards, and the Saints were flagged 5 times for 51 yards. Both were flagged quite frequently. I don't think that the field was necessarily tilted against the Giants in terms of number of penalties, but they were bigger misses that affected the outcome of the game more than the calls that were made or missed against the Saints.
Correct. It just felt like the Giants penalties were at the worst times, and the Saints dodged some penalties more than the Giants dodged penalties. Just a naked eye kind of test, That's why you can't always go by the box score.
Right, and I think that that's also one of those things where, again, you got to play your way through it. And I think that it's disappointing that the officials would have that mindset about thinking about officiating a Super Bowl. But, hey, if you'd make enough plays and you sustain drives, you take the outcome of the game out of the officials' hands, and the Giants didn't do that on offense yesterday.
Yeah, it was certainly felt like 11 versus 12, and the Giants aren't good enough to win most 11-on-11s right now. So,
and I look at this season, if we go big picture here, Ryan, I think that, And we're going to preview the Carolina Panther game and go through the key matchups as we normally do a little bit later on in the week. But I look at these next 3 games, and it defines the rest of the season. I think if you want to have any thought about competing for the division, and by the way, the NFC East is suddenly wide open with the Giants trailing by a game and a half behind the Redskins, who were on the bye week yesterday. They're 2-1. You have the Eagles at 2-2, the Cowboys at 2-2, and then the Giants in the basement at 1-3. If you don't somehow steal one of these games, preferably the Giants.
I think you need to win 2 to really be alive. If you win 2, you're 3-4. If you win 1, you're 2-5. I mean,
Yeah, but if that one comes against the Eagles, a division opponent, that really helps you in the long run. But
let's
if you
keep the fans into it and reading and listening. So yeah, sure, you only have to win. Even if you go 0-3, at least you're 1-6. You still have a chance.
Well, listen, I'm not saying you go 1-6, you still have a chance. I'm saying that the rest of the division is so bad. You look at the Eagles yesterday going down and losing to Tennessee. The Cowboys needed a late fourth quarter drive to kick a game-winning field goal at home against a Lions team that we all saw in Detroit for a week. Wasn't all that great on defense. And you have Washington, who I think is still really flawed, especially when you lose to the Colts at home. I think that if you can escape at 2-5, you're not completely dead, is all I'm saying. If they go 0-3, it's time to really start breaking down the game film of Will Grier and Justin Herbert and Drew Lock and all of the top quarterbacks in the draft. Because if you're 1-6, there's no coming back from that, regardless of who's in your division.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
All right, so we'll be back on Thursday. Ryan, any final thoughts before we close the book on the Saints game on Sunday?
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if Davis Webb was on this team.
Oh, listen to you.
when I would be calling for Davis Webb to get his first career NFL start. We don't have to worry about it because he's not here. But I can't help but wonder when I would be saying, it's time to see Davis Webb. We won't see Kyle Lauletta because he is not even taking practice snaps as the third stringer, and we won't see Alex Tanney because there's really no point in seeing Alex Tanney. But if Webb was here, it would certainly make for an interesting storyline.
If they're 1-3, and again, I think it's just semantics of how they list Alex Tanney and they keep him up, and obviously Lauletta is the inactive quarterback. But if they're 1-6. I think there will start to be some rumblings to get Kyle Lauletta on the field because you can't make the mistake of the previous regime and know whether or not you quote unquote need to draft a quarterback after a 4-12, 5-11, 3-13 season. So if you're 0-3 over this pivotal stretch of the season, I think that around Thanksgiving it might be time to think about playing Kyle Lauletta because you have to get a look.
Yeah, that give us all something to write about at that point.
He's Ryan Dunleavy. I'm Matt Lombardo. We're going to be writing a lot on NJ.com, so make sure you keep it locked on the homepage, NJ.com/Giants. Follow Ryan on Twitter at RY Dunleavy. I'm at Matt Lombardo NFL. And again, please subscribe to the Talk is Cheap podcast on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. You can also find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, all your favorite podcast platforms. Ryan, looking forward to the end of the week to do this again, and we'll talk to you later on.
I'm looking forward to my Burger King lunch.